Hello, and welcome to the Comedians Paradise. This is where we speak to comedians, clowns, and comedy promoters from across the globe. Now, today's guest is the beautiful, brilliant Marc Ryan. He is a comedian all the way in Adelaide, and he is a term that I know nothing about from Australia. He is a bogan comedian. He's a comedian who's been through hell and back. He's a man that helps prevent people from suicide. He is a man of many stories. Please welcome the fantastic Marc Ryan.
Hey Marvin, how you doing? Thanks for having me on your podcast. This is cool.
Oh, thanks for coming on, man.
You said about the bogan thing, right? And so I should have done it before. I'm just looking at what, for your English audience, what a bogan would be, right? So I asked an English friend of mine, who's a comic, Kyle Legacy. I was like, can you tell me what a bogan would be? So in England, it'd be a chav or a scally.
Okay, fair enough, yes.
Yeah, so that's for the most part, a bogan, like for me, is a down-to-earth, kind of really lovely human being who's a bit odd and a bit quirky, but like what we call over here a salt of the earth kind of person. Do you know what I mean? That
Okay.
which is different to a redneck.
Okay.
Because if you've got audience members that are like, oh, a redneck's a bigot for the most part.
Okay.
All right. So they'd get angry at me and go, oh, we're not bigots. But you are. Like, but yeah, that's the difference.
I hear that bogans make a lot of money working in like construction jobs and like working in like plumbing or something like that. That's what I heard from some Australians in the UK. I hear that a lot of them are quite successful.
Yeah, so a lot of bogans are tradies or tradesmen. So,
Okay.
and there are a lot of bogans, I guess, would be people that work in mines. And like, obviously, Australia's biggest export is mining, is minerals. So there are a lot of what they call cashed up bogans in Australia.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also heard there's a famous program or like YouTube channel or some sort of cartoon based in bogans. Is that right?
Oh, there's a few different ones. I don't know worldwide ones, but there is a few different ones. And there's a TV show. I can't even remember what it's called. I don't watch much TV. I just kind of watch sport. But I mean, look, the Australian cricket team are for the most part all bogans.
Oh,
Yeah, kind of. Especially back in the day, especially when you're talking David Boone and all those. David Boone's like the Lord figurehead of bogans, I guess. He'd be one of the kings.
so it basically sort of basically people that are from they grow up in rougher or poorer parts of Australia, but they're very but they tell the truth and they're fairly they say it as it is sort of people.
Yeah, yeah. Like, for the most part, we come from low economic. What's that? Like, I'm not good with my words, but yeah, low income areas, and we're good people. You know what I mean? Like we don't judge too many people. Like we don't like for me, I don't judge. And that's my experience of bogans. I don't really judge people, and I'm not drinking at the moment, but there might be a stereotype that they drink a lot of piss.
Fair enough. And what is the misconception of like bogans from those in Australia, but also those from outside Australia? Because I remember I did a theatre course with, I'd say the two girls from Australia were on a slightly higher socioeconomic level as they were in
Yeah.
theatre, and they were doing sort of impressions of bogans saying, yeah. So
Yeah.
what's the truth of like bogans and like what's the misconception?
Oh, they've definitely got an accent. Like they've got a different, like, yeah. But I guess the misconception would be, again, like I said before, like they're racist or they're homophobic, and the bogans I know, they're just like, we don't care. We don't care. You just do you. I mean, you just Yeah, but then you've got Queenslanders, and they're different to all of Australia. It's a whole different thing. I can only speak of Adelaide, but like, yeah, like for the most part, you know, we wear flip flops a lot, so we might look like we're daggy, and we might be daggy and a bit uncouth, but we've got a heart of gold. Well, I know I do, and my mates do. So yeah.
What is the difference with Queensland? Tell me.
Oh look, no, like Queensland are probably a bit on the racy side, the racist side of.
Okay.
Well, they just got a right wing government voted in on on the premise of uh, what was their slogan? Real time for real crime, or adult time for adult real crime, or something like that. Because we've got the Aboriginal people in Australia are very disadvantaged to the rest of us, and up in Queensland there's a big crime thing, so they're talking about putting young kids in prison, like 10-year-olds in prison, instead of trying to rehab like we'll just put them in prison first. And they got voted in on a massive swing. They're right wing party. So yeah, they're a bit racist.
Oh, good. I don't know. What am I saying good for? I don't know what to say.
Well, if you come over, you can come to Adelaide. We're not so racist. I would say we're pretty good in Adelaide.
Well, I mean, I'm. Some people say that I'm Mexican looking. Some say that I'm Oriental looking. Some say I don't know. I look like Will from the In-Betweeners. Some say I look like the guy from the Flight of the Conchords. So I think they'll be a bit confused. And I think if I went to Queensland, I'll put on a Spanish accent just to confuse them.
And then they'd love you, and then ask you to make them a coffee. Can you be a barista for us?
Oh,
It's very transient up there as well. They'd be like,
oh,
"Hey, you want to work in a cafe?"
oh, that's cool. I'll make him a leaf then. Now, one of the things is, so uh, how has your background shaped your comedy as a whole?
Well, I've been doing comedy for probably 14 or 15 years now, and then without going into too much, probably about 6 years ago, I had a nervous breakdown due to a trigger from trauma from the past, and it kind of rewrote everything. So, before that, I never really touched on mental health. I never really talked about anything like that. I just did normal fun gags about my family and stuff. But now, um, dealing with some of the stuff I deal with in my own life, I've changed the narrative into, well, hang on a sec. My whole thing is if I can help one person not take their life, then that's my job done. You know what I mean? Like if I can connect with one person at a show and go, hey, look, we might feel this way. I don't tell jokes. I think the best way to put it, and I'm not saying I'm anything, but it would be Ted Lasso. You know, Ted Lasso's up and down, like there's real dramatic stuff that happens, and you're kind of like it's heartbreaking. And all of a sudden, it's funny again, and you're like, oh, shit, this is a roller coaster. That's kind of how I try and do my shows.
And what's the how? One of the things that I've found with people when they go into the sort of big personal things, they either when I've seen it at gigs, it goes too long and people get a bit uncomfortable. They get uncomfortable about it, and then or it goes by someone would say something really dark or a bit odd. Like I remember one comedian was talking about staring at women in the tube, and then everyone got really uncomfortable about it, and then he got upset that they didn't like it. But with what I'm guessing, as a lot of the stuff you say is stuff that happens to you. It's not like you're saying this and that. It's just what happened to you.
Mm. Well, right, because I talk about trauma, like stuff that happened to me as a kid, and I've learned. I think I've been on this really cool journey where I've learned, like by performing to non-comedy audiences, right? So like the shows that I do, a lot of the time are in little country towns or back hall, like little halls all around the place with people that aren't comedy people. Like everyone loves comedy for the most part, but I go to places where they're 700 kilometres away from Adelaide, and they're a group of men because unfortunately our suicide rate in Australia is huge with men. Right, so we're talking to a group of men who've rocked up for an event. Again, not comedy people, but I've had to really fine tune an art of communicating to them without lights and without music bringing me on, and just me going, hey, let's do this. But the uncomfortable part of stuff is I've learned how to deal with some of that, because a lot of the time people get uncomfortable because they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. So they shout something out, or they'll laugh. I have a lot of people laugh at my shows, right? But in the wrong parts. Like I'm a comedian, they're meant to laugh, right? But like I'll talk about, something that happened to me as a kid, and you hear people laugh and they're like, oh. But I'm smart enough to know they're not laughing. They're just kind of uncomfortable, and they don't know how to express that uncomfortability, so they laugh. And we almost had a fight at a show once because one lady's like, you can't laugh at that. And so I pointed out, I said, hey, no, he's not laughing at that. He's just uncomfortable with what he's just heard, and he doesn't know how to deal with it or internalize it. So that's all right. He can be uncomfortable. He's actually being mean to me. And then the whole audience were angry at him. I was like, no, it's all right. Like we can do this. He's not being an asshole. And then from then the show was good.
You addressed the elephant in the room.
Yeah. And yeah.
So as you build up the tension when you're telling a lot of dark and obviously things that people feel a bit uncomfortable around, how important is the punchline? How important is it to break the tension with a really good punchline?
Oh, it's a critical part, because like you said, you don't want this to be a sermon, or you don't want this to be a sob story. Like this isn't a sob story, right? Like I from the start of the show, I'm like, this is no sob story. Like I'm still alive. You know what I mean? I've attempted to hurt myself plenty of times, and I live with that thought every day, right? I've got PTSD and stuff, so I live back. I'm still here. Like I'm still fighting every day of my life. So there's no sob story here. This is just what happened. But you make sure that punchline is going to be sharp. It's going to be good, because otherwise it just becomes a lecture, and then all of a sudden people are disinterested, or they're like, oh, this is just too much, and they tap out.
What's been a moment where you've had people be uncomfortable, apart from what you just mentioned, where you've had people be uncomfortable? You tell a story that's quite big, the punchline didn't quite land, but you were able to turn things around and make them laugh.
I tell one story about I got asked to show once in the backyard of someone's house, and again, because I guess I'm not a scene comedian. I perform all around the place, and I said I've done jails before. I've performed all kinds of different places, right? And I'm not scared of odd kind of venues. But I said, yeah, I'll come to a show in your backyard. And the lady says, kick into the show. I said, what's that? She goes, the guy you're performing for has only got 2.5 weeks to live because they've stopped his cancer treatment. And I was like, what? And they're like, he wants to go see the Fringe, because we had the Fringe on at the time. And we had the Fringe on at the time, but because he's low immune system, he couldn't go to see any shows. So can you bring the show to him? It's like, yeah. And then when I'm going, I'm like, I'm pretty much performing at a funeral. Like, because everyone in the room knows he's going to be dead in 2.5 weeks. And oh man, I just stayed up all night. Like, how do I do this? How do I perform to people that are grieving? Because they've already started to grieve. They know what the end is. And so I tell that story, and it gets really tense, as you can imagine. But I've got this really killer punchline that I've worked on for a long time now. At first, it didn't work so well. So you kind of just move on and try and get to the next funny bit. You know what I mean? Like, and then you try and sometimes at first it was a struggle because it was such a risky joke. talk about death, like there's got to be a payoff. But I've failed a few times at the start of doing this stuff. But you're just trying to move on as quick as you can, I guess. And yeah, and try to say if the punchline doesn't drop properly, you try and improv something really quick and go, fuck, what are we gonna do? Yeah.
So I know that you've done a few sort of, you've done quite a lot of shows on things
Yeah.
you've been through, and you obviously you do. You're not. You say that you're not like a scene comedian. What does that mean as a whole? Do you not do club sets, or you mostly just talk shows?
Well, Adelaide's only got one club, right? Rhino Room. Until Fringe pops around. I don't know if you heard of Adelaide Fringe before, but Adelaide Fringe is like the biggest Fringe festival or arts festival apart from Edinburgh. So there's only one club in Adelaide, and it only runs on a Friday night at the moment. So Adelaide's a small place, right? And so it's hard. And there have been a few clubs come and go, and people have really tried. So I don't, for the most part, I try and create my own work. And so I go to pubs and go, look, can I put a show on? And then, again, the shows aren't high tech. There's no stings of music or whatever it is coming in. Like there's just kind of me going, hey, who wants to have a laugh? And then I try and bring other comics with me. I've tried a few different things, but there's a little scene here in Adelaide, but I don't really do those types too much.
Okay. And it's when you do because one of the things I had a great guest on a couple of weeks ago, Peter Buckley Hill. He runs the PBH Fringe, and he says one of the biggest mistakes that comics make on the comedy club circuit is when they do an hour show, they just think it's stringing two 20-minute sets together, and like the whole point of an hour show is you have a narrative, you have a story, you have ups and downs, you have a point that it meets, and there needs to be a theme that gets people to say, oh, this is why I'm going to go to this show. When you're playing, like, as you said, you got booked to do this or that, when you're getting booked to do shows that are maybe 20 minutes, I don't know how it is in Australia, 30 minutes, compared with an hour show, how do you adjust your set?
I've got a few different experiences that I pull from. You know what I mean? So normally if I go in the country, they're normally 40-minute sets. Or if I do, but I've been doing this same kind of material for the last 5 years. And I actually started doing it. I did a series of shows called The Beautiful Bogan versus the Black Dog, which over here in Australia, I don't know about England, but the black dog is a metaphor, I guess, for depression or anxiety or mental illness. And so that was my coming out, almost like, look, I'm not well. Like I'm a really unwell human. And so I did 30 gigs in 30 days and just did shows everywhere, anywhere anyone would have me. Some audiences were 4 people, some were 30, some were 100. But I just, really honed a craft over that 30-day period. So now I've been doing that for 4 years. I know if I've got 20 minutes, I can still touch on stuff that's deep, but without it being over the top. Because, the worst thing you want to do is do a 5-minute spot and talk about suicide and then leave everyone just going, all right. Like, you got to bring it back. Like, you can't just drop all this shit and, trauma dump on all it, which is another trick to doing this. You don't want to trauma dump on people either and leave them there going, oh man, like, what did I just hear? Because that's not good for the audience either. So it's a bit tricky, but it's all right. I've kind of worked it out.
And do Australian audiences differ across different parts of the country? Because I heard that in parts of Melbourne, don't quote me on this and don't say this, but some people have said that Melbourne's become a bit more, some comics have said a bit more wokey. And they say that if...
but see, a little bit. I don't do much outside of that just because I've got a family. Right? I want to be a responsible parent and a responsible ex-husband, and I want to be there for my children. So my kind of plan is, my kids are 19, 17 and 15. So I'm a few years away from, only a few years away from being able to travel properly once they get licenses and their jobs and stuff. But when I have performed in Melbourne and Sydney, yeah, it's a little bit more wokey. It's a little bit because my ex-wife is also Aboriginal, so I never rip on Aboriginal people. I more tell jokes. I rip on white people and white culture and how we've treated Aboriginal people. So sometimes that's quite hilarious because white people can't take a joke for the most part. Oh, I'm offended. Oh no! Or the response I get a lot of the time. I got this joke about how my son wanted to dress up as Captain Hook for we have a thing called Book Week. He wanted to dress up as Captain Hook, but the joke is that I misheard him. I thought he said Captain Cook, and I was like, oh no! Like Aboriginal boys can't dress up as Captain Cook. That's culturally inappropriate. Like. And white people get so offended, like, oh no, you can't say that. Yes, we can. Like, yeah, what are you so offended for? Yeah, that's what I found a little bit.
Does it depend on the place it's coming from and like the way it's said? I mean, Jimmy Carr gets away with it because he's known as being that sort of comic. But I mean, for now, if you're coming up and you do that sort of thing, you're likely to get in a bit of trouble.
But this is what I agree with what you're saying about where it comes from, right? Because you like comedy's the last place of free speech, right? And you can say what you want when you've got a microphone in your hand. But I mean, there's consequences to your action. So if you're too edgy or you're too offensive, you just won't get gigs, right? People just go, we're not going to book you because you're just too much. But I think it really comes from a place because people can tell when someone's hateful. Right? They tell the spirit behind the joke. Like if you can say one thing playfully and in a lovely way and it not be offensive, but you can say another thing and it sounds hateful, and you're like, oh shit, that really sounds disgusting. Like I don't know, that's my perception of it anyway.
It's the way you sell the joke. Is it in? I mean, some comics have said it on the podcast before. One of them, Howard Smith, said he doesn't do a joke first thing that goes on stage. He he looks at the room and he comments on that. Like he's all about. He says it's about connecting first, and once they've connected with you and you're on side, they will buy from you now.
Yes, yeah, 100%. Again, I can only speak of my experiences where I go a lot. Then they never have comedy shows. So we're already almost connected because they're so grateful that someone is 700 kilometers away from Adelaide, and I will say, when I do those shows, I mill around with the crowd before I even get on stage. So my connection is made beforehand. You know what I mean? Because I'll have a beer with them beforehand. I'll talk to them. Hey, how's the family like? And I'll do a lot of talking then. So then when I get on stage, we're already comfortable.
Yeah.
And I guess that's one of the advantages of working in the country.
Okay. Yeah, does it make them feel like more, how does it help your show in terms of the audience from their side, do you feel? Well, just your side.
Well, because I think all of a sudden, if someone comes up to me and I don't, like I've got a lot of stuff that goes on in my head, and I don't think much of myself. Like I've got some self-loathing issues or whatever. But sometimes when you roll into these towns and you've got posters of your face on it, and then you rock up at the shop, people are like, "Oh my God, you're the comedian!" But then instead of having, like, "Yes, I am a comedian," and you go, "Hey, how you going? You good?" And you have a normal conversation with someone, all of a sudden that whole thing is dropped, and they're like, "Oh, so we're like friends." Yeah, of course we're friends. Like you're going to come to my show. Like I'm so grateful that you take time out of your day to come see me. Like there's no ego in that. And all of a sudden we're on the same level. So then when I get up on stage and tell my jokes, it's not just a comedian, it's someone that you've actually interacted with that day. And you've got a bond or you're on the level again.
Yeah. Is that sometimes an issue? Because I've found that one of the things that I found a bit interesting is quite a few times where I've come across comedians that are really high up the ladder, like Simon Evans or TV names or even top pro names. A lot of them are quite easygoing, easy to talk to. Some of them obviously not, but most that I've come across are really easy, friendly, all right people. The ones that tend to give the most issues are the ones that aren't quite there yet. And I find it always funny that it's always the ones that aren't the real bollocks that give me the most bollocks.
100%. Yeah. Because I think if you know who you are and you're secure in your art form, you don't have to prove anything to anyone, right? Like it's like a top flight footballer, or like, over here in Australia we have AFL, and I've got a few friends that are AFL players, right? And they're really good, and they're lovely to everyone. Like, they've got time for everyone because they're secure in themselves. It's the dudes underneath that you try and get a photo with, where you go, oh, that's so and so, yeah. And you're like, oh, hang on a sec, like you're cool, but you're barely making the list. Like, you're like the 24th on the team. Like, just settle down. Like, it's just cool to see you. I don't know. That's my perception. Yeah, I think the better they are, more times the more approachable.
But I mean, from their side as well, I mean, that must be difficult to deal with when you got all these people coming. I don't know how they deal with it. All these people coming up to them and
Oh, yeah, but I mean, I know money's not everything, but if you're paying me that much money as well, I'll do what you want.
fair enough.
You want me to go out and shake a few hands and take a few photos? I know it's not money like Premier League money, but it's still good money.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's just something that I found funny recently with performers and like even with the podcast itself, in terms of people that get back to you, or like in other things in performers or dealing with entertainers. I found that I get more issues from people that think that the bollocks are being the bollocks. I don't know why. It's funny.
Oh, it is funny. Like, I do like going to, and Adelaide's a small place, but sometimes you'll find that at an open mic, you find a really good open micer who thinks he's the bee's knees, and you're like, oh, like, and if you're an open mic, you're testing out material, and then I don't know. I do find that though. Yeah, I do find that what you're saying is true.
So with the one thing that I really would like to chat to you about, and
Yeah,
what's it like when you help others through like either your stories you tell on stage, but also because you're an active campaigner against, you mentioned before the podcast about helping people go through their stuff and go through their issues, like you're anti-suicide prevention helper.
yeah, yeah. So I'm a suicide prevention advocate, right?
Yeah.
And according to my therapist, I've got to slow down a little bit because I'm still in therapy. Like, I'm not healed from anything at all, right? But because I do help a lot of people, and my phone's always open, and I'm always, people message me and different stuff, and if they're in distress, and I've got time for a lot of people. But my therapist has maybe said I've got to slow down a little bit sometimes. But when I've got a heart to help. Like, if someone's struggling with mental illness, I don't want you to take your life, because every life is important, right? Like, every life has some value in this. There could be arguments against criminals and stuff, but for normal people, everyday people that aren't those kind of guys, like, every life counts, and everyone, so. But it's nice to be able to connect with people and be like, hey, I get it. Okay, I get what's going on up here, and I get that you feel worthless, so I get that the pain's too much for now. But if we just sit together, and I've learned over the time, right, I can't fix anything. Right, I can just listen and hold space for people, and that's it's kind of a cool thing.
When you, one thing that I've found for myself, or I've seen with people that do have a few things that need to sort out, a lot of the times they're not looking for you to tell them what to do. What they want is just someone to listen. I found that for myself and for others.
Oh, I, 100%. Like that's the beauty of it, right? Like you don't want like I can't fix my own life. Like life's a mess. I can't fix that. So how am I going to help someone fix theirs? But I can listen to you, and there's no judgment. There's no judgment here. Just spill it all out. Like let's just talk. Like I'm not going to judge you. One of my favorite poems. I love poetry, and one of my favorite poems is by a Persian poet called Rumi, and he says, "Beyond the idea of right doing and wrong doing, there's a field. Let's go lay down there, and talk without words, right?" And that's the basis of everything I do. Is like people go, "Oh, I did the wrong thing." No, stop. A lot of the time, we do what we have to do to survive. So people are like, "Oh, I drink too much alcohol." Yeah, maybe, or maybe you're just trying to survive. So let's not criticize ourselves and run ourselves down and make mistakes. In that space, let's just talk. Because no one needs to fix it. I hate people trying to fix me. Oh, you could do this, you could do that. Oh, I don't know.
So when you do I've only had therapy when I was 15, so I've lost a bit of touch of what goes on. But I've seen The Sopranos, so that is my understanding of therapy. Dr. Malfi and Tony Soprano. What goes on like when you're giving therapy to others, but when you're receiving your own therapy, what actually happens? Like they ask you about what goes on, you explain it, but they just don't do any suggestions or anything. It's just or how does it work?
So I've got a really good, I'm lucky. I've got a really good therapist, right? And my therapist has saved my life countless times, right? I owe my life to my therapist, right? But because of childhood trauma, I went through a thing called exposure therapy, which people listening, if they've been in the army or got PTSD, that's where you relive your trauma to the point where it just becomes a story, right? So that was my first introduction to therapy. And it's chaos. Like it's pure, like it's just, and it's real hard. Like it's real hardcore kind of therapy, right? So now I've kind of gone through that. So that was about a year I've done that. And now I just do like monthly checkups where we go in and check in and my therapist will go, "Hey, how's this going?" Or, has anything popped up? And then you do, and then you just talk through stuff. But again, my therapist is good. So he leaves space for me to be able to go, he might go, "Oh, so this might come up." And he goes, "Well, what do you think about this?" I'm like, "Oh, should probably do this, or should I do this?" I'd be like, "Oh, yeah, it's just a conversation, right? It's nothing too scary. It's not laying down on a couch but they portray in the movies. It's not, have one of those big, it's just kind of sitting and chatting, and that's what my experience is."
Okay, what is it about what should people do therapy? What's your sort of opinion on that? Like, how does it change? So you said it's changed your life, but what does it do for you as an individual to have that person that you can air all your crap out on?
Because for me, it's a space that I can air anything, and there's no judgment. He's not going to judge me and go, "Oh," he might go, "Oof, it's a bit average." But it's a safe space, and I think it's good to have a safe space where we can just, put all our dirty laundry out for the most part, and go, "Look, this is what's going on," and then you walk out there feeling 100% better. For me, I do, because I feel like I've just unpacked everything to a really safe person. He's not going to go back and tell. There's no risk that he can go tell someone. Whereas, sometimes, if you unpack stuff to friends, I've always got this fear that, oh, shit, what if they accidentally slip up? You go, "Oh, Mark told me this the other day. Did you hear what this happened?" And all of a sudden it comes back to you and you're like, "Oh, well, that was setting confidence. Like, I don't need you telling everyone my business," because our therapist isn't allowed to do that. It has to stay confidential.
and I find those people aren't my fucking friends. Ha ha ha. No,
Yeah, right. But then there's damage done on the other, like, and that's right. Like, then that's happened to all of us, I guess. Then you go, hang on a sec, what? Well, you're not my friend, and you cut them off. Um, but then there's damage done because all of a sudden people know your dirty laundry or secrets, and it's a bit, yeah, it's a bit shit.
yeah, I'm someone that's had that happen a few times, and I'll say this to the people that are listening out there, and I'll say this to you as well. I don't know when it gets to a certain point with someone. I Once I'm done with someone, I do it quite brutally. Like it's like I'll block them on all social media. I will, yeah, it's done. Like I'm not gonna. I'll maybe say hello to you, but that'll be it, done. And I'll walk the other way. And I have the businesses. You do your thing on the other side of the road, and I'll do my thing. But from now, I know what I want around me, and I don't need no bollocks around me.
100%. And so I've got this whole thing now where um, I found a peace in my life, like as in a peace in my soul for the first time in a long time. And I'll do anything to protect that. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm actually on the inside, I'm feeling happy for the first time in a long time. And so if anyone encroaches on that, they're done. Nah,
And yeah, do you do it politely or I think what I'd done recently is I should have just said to someone, listen, you've done this and that. I wish you best of well, but we're done or something. But I just did it quietly and just. But I don't know. I was a bit too worried about them trying to twist and turn whatever I said, so I just quietly.
yeah, no, on social media, I'll just do it. I'll just block people straight up. Do you know what I mean? Because we live in such a social media world now that we're like I've got a pretty busy life when it comes to running around with children who play basketball and go to school and different stuff. I don't see a lot of people outside of Facebook or interact so with a lot of people outside of that. Um, so if that's the kind of scenario that someone, I just block them, and if I see them in public, be like, hey, what's going on? Just leave it at that. I'll be polite, but I won't give them anything of myself. I
Yeah,
won't give them too much. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I was a comedian. Hey, what's going on? And then just move on.
yeah. Um, this is going to be a really terrible segue, and from what you
You're
said
right.
there, but you said this is someone from being from the UK. I know
Yeah,
absolutely nothing about what life is like for Aboriginals. All I know is that it's quite brutal what's happened to them, just like it's been brutal what's happened to the American Indians in America. What's it
yeah.
like? What's your experience? What is the misconception of life for Aboriginals, and what's it really like for Aboriginals in Australia?
It's rough. It's rough if we take into account, and this has only come up the last 20 years. So if you think of my ex-mother-in-law who's passed away now, right? Um, she was what they call a stolen generation child, right? So when the government decided that they would move fair-skinned children into foster families and leave the darker-skinned children on what they call a mission, right? So that's how they separated children. That was only 50 or 60 years ago. Like we're not even talking two generations, right? So apart from all the brutal shit that happened beforehand, we're still living with intergenerational trauma now, and it spikes everywhere. Like it's, you know, um, everything you think of, like their mortality rates are lower than white people's. Their suicide rates are higher than white people. They're the most incarcerated people in Australia. Their poverty rate is below everybody else. Um, it's it's a national scourge. Like we've done a job on our Aboriginal people, and it's not a good job. Do you know what I mean? And now we're trying to claw back, and there's initiatives to try and bring people back and educate people in different systems. But I'm not saying it's too far gone at all. Because there's always hope. If we're alive, there's always hope. Um, but there's been hundreds of years of damage done, and then people are trying their best, right? And there are a good group of people trying their best, but there's also a lot of shit you've got to undo. to actually make it even on par, and make it even a little bit fair. And there'll be some Australians, they hear this, they'll go, yeah, but we give a lot of money to Aboriginal people, we give a lot of money to healthcare, we do this, we do that. Yeah, but you're undoing generations of trauma. Like, you just can't give someone money and go, oh yeah, go fix yourself. Like, that's not how this shit works. So yeah, it's rough for them.
Okay. Yeah, I'd imagine it doesn't really get spoken of enough, does it?
Oh, not at all. Like, over here obviously it does because it's a national issue, but everywhere else it doesn't really. Do you know what I mean? We've got, people might not believe this in the UK, but we've got Alice Springs, right, which is it's right in the centre of Australia almost. Like, if you drove from Adelaide straight up to Darwin, right, which is the Northern Territory, and it is this real weird centre of Australia kind of community, and it's very transient, and it's very black and white, as in there's a lot of Aboriginal people, a lot of white people. But there's communities that are 200 kilometres away from there that have no running water, no running electricity, or no electricity, and like literally back 100 years ago, and it's only 200 kilometres from a major town. Like, how does that work? How are they not serviced with running water, at least? Like, most places in the world have running water, and they've got no running water or electricity. And then you wonder why people are pissed off.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, but no one wants to talk about it over here because, it's a bit, you make us look bad. Yeah, we're kind of a bit shit at that. Like, we're good at other things, but we're kind of a bit shit at this. And that's the right to admit it as well, I think.
Now, speaking on things that are going on in the world and all that, what are things that you think need to change about what you've experienced in the Australian comedy scene, and who are the unsung heroes of the Australian comedy scene?
Well, look, I think when you look at the Australian comedy scene, right, if you're in Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane, right, and I'm not trying to speak out of school, but I am, like, they get all the TV gigs, right, especially since COVID, right? That whole East Coast border, every TV show, you see it's the same 10 comedians all the time, right? And then maybe there's a variation, but if you're on the East Coast, you've kind of got it made. And then you come to Adelaide, which we're right in the middle, like South Australia's kind of in the middle there. The unsung heroes are really the crowds that rock up outside of Fringe. So like I said before, we've got Adelaide Fringe, which is the biggest arts festival in the Southern Hemisphere. Fringe is a massive festival. So many, like, even UK comics come over. But if you try and sell a ticket outside of Fringe time, or for 3 months after Fringe, the people that rock up to those shows, they're the unsung heroes. Because it is hard work. Like, it is, because we've got football over here as well. So my unsung heroes are the audiences that rock up to shows weekly sometimes. Because there's a lot of fickle comedy fans in Adelaide for the most part. The best way to explain it, and I'm talking a lot, but like, it's like a smorgasbord during February and March over here, where you can see anything you want to see. But then after Fringe finishes, a lot of the audience just go, we saw comedy for a month. And then it's hard. Then it's a hard slog. Then it's, especially CBD, especially in the metropolitan area, it is hard to get an audience after Fringe.
Are these people that come from all across Australia, or is it just mostly from the locals?
Well, it's really funny because I was very heavily involved in a comedy club in Adelaide for a while there, and then it went under, like it went bankrupt. But most of the audience were all interstate audience on a Saturday night, because people from interstate are used to having comedy clubs to go. We don't have a comedy club in Adelaide on a Saturday night. Mind blowing. We don't have a comedy club on a Saturday night in Adelaide.
But yeah.
Which most people, we've got one on a Friday night, That's it. So, yeah, it's hard work. Adelaide's a hard slog when it comes to comedy.
What are the benefits of it being a hard slog rather than an easier slog?
Well, like if you can get through this, you can get through anything, right? So if you can perform to smaller audiences, and look, I've done a show to one person before, which a lot of comics have, but and they also admit it's more a hostage situation than it is stand up. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, well, you're here, I'm here, I've got nowhere to be. Do you want to do the show? Yeah, okay. So we do a show to one person. But I think the harder audiences you do, the easier it is when you get a good audience, if that makes sense.
Okay, sure.
If you can push through and do your 20 minutes or do your half an hour to a hard audience, or to 5 or 6 people, which, I think plenty of comedians have done, then when you get a full house and you get some energy back and you get some interaction, then you're not, then you kill it.
Yeah. And for any comedian, performer, or anyone that's listening in right now, what qualities has your life given you that you would like? What have you learned from your life that you would like to share with others in terms of succeeding in the performance journey?
I think I've learned, like through stand-up and through doing this, is that everyone has a story, right? And I might be a bit mystical and a bit little kind of out there, right? But I kind of have this philosophy that every audience member is meant to be at your show. Like, I don't know, it sounds crazy, but for my shows, like I thank the audience every time because I'm so grateful you're here, right? It brings gratitude into my life because I'm like, you didn't have to come to my show tonight. You got babysitters. Maybe you've taken time out of your day to come watch me perform. I'm so grateful for that. So I'm grateful for everything. And I kind of believe that, we are where we're meant to be right now. It's destined or whatever it is, whatever people want to call it. But I believe in destiny, and I believe that even this conversation, whatever's led to us having this conversation, is there something meaningful in it, right? So I approach every audience in that way. It doesn't matter if they're big or small. I'm so grateful that they're there. I'm grateful that they're going to laugh, we're going to have some fun, and I try and learn off them as well because everyone's got something to give. That's what I think, anyway.
And for anyone that's looking to find out about you, how do they find out about you, Marc?
So I'm on Instagram under the Beautiful Bogan on Instagram, and I understand I'm not beautiful. That was a whole different kind of thing, but I'd like to think I'm a beautiful kind of human being, not on the outside, but on the inside. But even then, that's, my doctors said my cholesterol's too high anyway, so maybe I'm not beautiful on the inside either. But the Beautiful Bogan on Instagram is probably the main place to find me, or on Facebook, sorry, under Marc Ryan. So spelled with a C. Now, some of your listeners might know Marcus Ryan, who's also, he does a lot of stuff in the UK. Different people, totally different people, but kind of got the same name.
Okay, so guys, just look for the Beautiful Bogan, Marcus
Beautiful
Ryan,
Bogan,
not for the other guy, and you'll find him in the UK.
The Beautiful Bogan. Just look for that. That's easier. I should have said that at the start. That's right.
Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I know I thoroughly have. I think I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Make sure you give this, if you like this episode, give it a 5-star review on Amazon, iTunes, or even Spotify. If you did not, keep it to yourself, okay? See you later, guys.